The Grand Assembly Chamber floated in the silence of space, a massive station that orbited the neutral world of Vex Prime. Inside its walls, representatives from 847 different species gathered under the bright artificial lights. The air hummed with 1,000 different breathing patterns, clicked with languages both spoken and signed, and carried the scent of beings from across the galaxy. Taemin stood at the entrance, his worn travel case gripped tight in one hand. His face showed the deep lines of someone who had lived through hard times. Gray streaked his dark hair, and his eyes held a sadness that seemed older than his 60 years. Beside him, his young aide Hana shifted nervously, her fingers smoothing the formal human diplomatic robes they both wore. "They won't listen," Taemin said quietly. "We have to try," Hana replied, though her voice wavered. It had been 200 years since humans last attended the Galactic Assembly. 200 years since humanity had withdrawn from galactic affairs, retreating to their small corner of space around Sol. The other species had celebrated their departure. Humans were considered primitive, paranoid, and backward. "Good riddance," the galaxy had said. Now Taemin was back, and he carried a warning. The chamber doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. Conversation died as every eye, stalk, sensor, and optical organ turned toward the two humans. The silence felt heavy and hostile. At the center podium, Crixtal spread his feathered wings. The avian leader's plumage shimmered with colors that showed his high rank among his people. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation device as smooth and condescending. "How unexpected," Crixtal said. "The hermits of Sol emerge from their cave. Tell us, humans, have you finally decided to rejoin civilization?" Laughter rippled through the assembly. Not kind laughter, but the mocking kind that cuts deep. Taemin walked forward, his boots clicking on the polished floor. He did not smile. He did not acknowledge the insult. He simply moved to the speaker's platform and set his case down with a heavy thud. "I request emergency session protocols," Taemin said. "I bring a warning of extinction-level threat." The laughter grew louder. Vormeth, the insectoid military commander, clicked his mandibles in what translated as scorn. His compound eyes glittered with amusement. "Extinction?" Vormeth buzzed. "Let me guess. You fear we will steal your precious solar system, your tiny collection of planets?" "I fear nothing for humanity," Taemin replied calmly. "We are safe. It is you I came to warn." Crixtal ruffled his feathers. "How noble. The backward species comes to save us." "Very well, human. You have 5 minutes. Entertain us with your warning." Taemin opened his case. Inside lay data tablets of a design older than most species in the room recognized. He activated the first one, and holographic displays filled the air above the assembly. Star charts appeared, showing the outer rim territories. Hana helped him link the data to the station's main display system, her hands steady despite her racing heart. 3 months ago, Taemin began, long-range human sensors detected anomalies beyond the Veil Nebula, entire sectors going dark, planets disappearing from our scans. He highlighted region after region on the map. Red markers bloomed like blood drops across the display. In the past month, 7 colony worlds beyond the Veil have stopped transmitting. Not distress signals, not farewells, just silence. Complete and absolute. "Sensor malfunctions," someone called out from the crowd. "Equipment failure," another voice added. Taemin continued as if he had not heard them. "We sent stealth probes to investigate. What they found?" The hologram changed. Grainy footage appeared, showing a planet that looked wrong. The surface was too smooth, too empty. No cities, no lights, no atmosphere. Just a barren sphere of rock. This was Colony Vex 7, population 4 million, established 20 years ago by the Kresh Alliance. 3 weeks ago, our probe reached it. The planet is a shell, hollow. Everything is gone. The buildings, the people, the air, even the minerals from deep in the crust. All consumed. Murmurs spread through the assembly, but they were skeptical murmurs, not frightened ones. Taemin showed more footage, more dead worlds, all with the same pattern of complete consumption. "These are not natural disasters," he said. "This is something ancient, something that was sleeping, something your expansion into the outer rim has awakened." "Ridiculous," Krixtal declared. "Your sensors are outdated. Your probes are malfunctioning. There are no mysterious threats beyond the veil. We have surveyed those regions ourselves." "You surveyed them too quickly," Taemin said. "You did not look at the dead worlds. You did not read the warnings." "Warnings?" Vormeth clicked. "What warnings?" Taemin pulled another tablet from his case. On 17 tomb worlds throughout the Outer Rim, previous civilizations left messages. Warnings carved in stone, etched in metal, embedded in indestructible crystals. All saying the same thing in their own languages. "Stay away. Do not colonize. What sleeps here devours all." The chamber erupted in argument. Species shouted at each other, at Taemin, at the very idea of ancient warnings. Hana flinched at the noise, but Taemin stood firm, unmoved by the chaos. Krixtal slammed his wing against the podium, creating a sharp crack that silenced the room. "Enough," he said. "Human, you come here with fairy tales and broken sensors, expecting us to abandon our expansion? Our colonies represent centuries of investment, trillions of credits, millions of lives building new futures." "Those lives will be consumed," Taemin said simply. "By what?" Vormeth demanded. "Show us this threat. Where is the enemy fleet? Where are the weapons? Where is the proof beyond grainy images and superstitious warnings from extinct species?" Taemin met his compound gaze without fear. "The previous species left those warnings because they learned too late. They did not survive to provide the proof you demand. We found their remnants. We studied their fate. We learned from their mistakes. And in your infinite wisdom, you hid in your solar system for 2 centuries, Krixtal said mockingly. "Afraid of shadows." "Not afraid," Taemin corrected. "Wise." He looked around the chamber at all the gathered species. Young civilizations, most of them. None older than a few million years. None with the patience to look at history and learn from it. "I make this formal warning now," Taemin said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "Leave the Outer Rim. Abandon all colonies beyond the Veil Nebula. Do not wake what sleeps there. Return to your home systems. Prepare your defenses. What is coming cannot be fought. It can only be survived." "We vote on this warning," Krixtal announced. "All in favor of heeding the humans' advice and abandoning our colonies, raise your signifier." 4 appendages rose in the vast chamber. 4 out of 847. All opposed? A forest of limbs, wings, tentacles, and stalks filled the air. "The vote is decided," Krixtal said with satisfaction. "We reject your warning, human. We will continue our expansion. Perhaps in another 200 years, you will emerge from hiding again with more stories." Taemin carefully packed his tablets back into the case. His face showed no surprise, no disappointment, only a deep, tired resignation. "We told you," he said quietly. "Remember that. When it comes, when everything you have built is being consumed, remember that we tried to warn you." He turned to leave. Hana followed, her head down. "One more thing," Taemin called back from the doorway. "When it comes, don't call us. Don't beg for human help. Don't ask for our technology or our sanctuary. We won't answer. You made your choice today. Live with it. Or die with it." The doors closed behind them with a final hiss. In the chamber, the assembly broke into chatter and laughter again. Humans, they agreed, were as foolish and paranoid as ever. Good thing they stayed in their tiny corner of space. Only a few representatives sat in silence, thinking about those grainy images of hollow worlds, wondering if perhaps, just perhaps, the humans knew something the rest of them had forgotten, but their voices were too small and the momentum of expansion too great. The galaxy would learn its lesson soon enough. 6 months had passed since Taemin delivered his warning to the Galactic Assembly. 6 months of silence from humanity, just as promised. Young Sik sat in his monitoring station, a small facility hidden in the dark space between stars. The station was old, built from human technology that predated most species' first ventures into space. Its systems hummed quietly, listening to the whispers of the galaxy. He took a sip of his cold coffee and watched the screens. Each one showed data streams from different sectors, monitoring signals from thousands of worlds. Most of it was routine: trade transmissions, news broadcasts, colony reports. Then one stream went silent. Young Sik sat up straight, his tired eyes suddenly alert. He ran diagnostics on his equipment. Everything worked perfectly. He checked the coordinates again. Colony Creche 9, established 4 months ago beyond the Veil Nebula. The signal had not degraded. It had not faded. It had simply stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch. "Misun," he spoke into his communication device. "Are you seeing this?" In another human listening post, 3 light-years away, Misun was already pulling up the same data. Her scientific mind raced through possibilities, eliminating each one as quickly as it appeared. "I see it," she replied. "No solar flares in that region, no asteroid impacts, no signs of warfare or distress." "Just silence," Young Sik said. "Just silence," she agreed. They watched and waited. Standard protocol said they should monitor for 24 hours before reporting. Perhaps it was a technical issue. Perhaps the colony's main transmitter had failed. But both of them knew better. They had read the reports from Taemin's mission. They understood what the warning had been about. 3 days later, the Galactic Coalition dispatched a relief fleet to Creche 9, 12 ships carrying repair equipment, emergency supplies, and medical teams. The fleet was commanded by Admiral Brektar, a seasoned officer who had led countless rescue missions. Young Sik and Misun monitored the fleet's approach. They listened to the confident chatter of the crew, the routine check-ins, the casual jokes. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Creche 9's system. Silence fell over the communication channels. Young Sik leaned closer to his screens, his heart pounding. When Admiral Brektar finally spoke again, his voice had changed. All the confidence was gone, replaced by something that sounded like horror. "Command," he said slowly. "The planet is... there's nothing here." "Define nothing, Admiral," the Coalition command responded. "I mean nothing. The colony is gone. The settlements are gone. There's no atmosphere. The planet's surface looks stripped, like someone took a giant spoon and scooped out everything." Young Sik and Misun exchanged looks across their communication link. "Sending probes down now," the Admiral continued. His crew worked in shocked silence, deploying scanning drones to the planet's surface. The data that came back made no sense. The planet's crust was intact but hollow in places. Chemical analysis showed no traces of the cities that should have been there. No debris, no ruins, no bodies. Even the metals and minerals that should have been in the ground were gone. It was as if someone had erased the colony from existence. "Pull back," Command ordered. "We'll send a science team to investigate." But Admiral Brektar never got the chance to withdraw. The sensors detected it first. A massive object moving through space, larger than any ship the Coalition had ever built. It did not register on standard scans because it was not made of normal matter. It existed somewhere between organic and mechanical, between alive and dead. The fleet tried to run. 12 ships activating their faster-than-light drives simultaneously, desperate to escape. They were not fast enough. Young-Sik watched his screens as the signals from all 12 ships vanished, not destroyed, consumed. The readings showed something impossible. The ships were being broken down into their component atoms, absorbed, processed. "Oh no," Mi-sun whispered. Over the next week, 3 more colonies went silent. The pattern was always the same. No warning, no distress call, just sudden and complete silence. Relief missions found the same thing each time. Empty worlds stripped bare. The 4th relief mission got footage. Captain Bo-Ra commanded a human stealth reconnaissance ship. Her vessel was small, old, and wrapped in sensor-dampening fields that made it nearly invisible. She had been ordered to observe from a distance, to gather intelligence without engaging. She positioned her ship at the edge of a system where a colony had just gone silent. And she waited. The Devourer arrived 6 hours later. Bo-Ra's hands shook as she recorded everything. The entity was vast, perhaps 50 kilometers long. Its surface rippled with patterns that hurt to look at, geometries that should not exist in normal space. Parts of it seemed solid, other parts flowed like liquid, and still other parts looked like they existed in multiple dimensions at once. It moved toward the colony world with patient, inevitable purpose. When it reached the planet, tendrils extended from its body. Not tentacles. Something more fundamental. They touched the planet's surface, and the consumption began. Bo-Ra watched through her ship's powerful sensors as the colony was unmade. Buildings dissolved into streams of matter that flowed up toward the Devourer. People, vehicles, plants, soil, water, air, everything became part of the same terrible harvest. The process took 12 hours. When it was done, the planet was a hollow shell, and the Devourer was larger than before. Bo-Ra transmitted her encrypted footage to human command and began the long journey back to safety. The Galactic Coalition received copies of the footage. Command centers across hundreds of worlds watched in growing horror. "What is it?" someone asked. No one had an answer. The Coalition military mobilized. This was what they were trained for, what all their weapons and ships had been built to handle. An enemy was an enemy, regardless of how strange it looked. They assembled the largest battle fleet in galactic history. 3,000 warships carrying enough firepower to crack planets. Admiral Vormeth himself took command. "We will show this creature the might of the Coalition," he declared. Young-Sik sent a message through encrypted human channels. It reached Coalition Command through unofficial routes. "Don't engage," the message read. "Retreat. Every ship you send will make it stronger." The Coalition ignored the advice. The fleet met the Devourer in the Kresh sector. 3,000 ships against one massive entity. The battle lasted less than an hour. Mi-sun monitored the data feeds from her station, tears streaming down her face as she watched. The Coalition's weapons did hit the Devourer. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, all of them struck home and did nothing. The Devourer absorbed the energy. It consumed the missiles. It grew slightly larger with each attack. Then it fought back. Those impossible tendrils reached out, moving faster than should have been possible for something so large. They touched ships, and the vessels simply came apart. Crews and all dissolved into streams of matter that fed the growing entity. Some ships managed to retreat. Perhaps a third of the fleet escaped by running in different directions. The rest were consumed, and the Devourer split. Mi-sun watched in horror as the single entity divided into 2, then 3, then 5. Each one smaller than the original, but still massive. They spread out, heading toward different colony worlds. "It's multiplying," she reported to Young-Sik. "Each time it consumes enough matter, it creates another." Young-Sik felt sick. He understood now why the ancient civilizations had left their warnings, why humanity had retreated and hidden. This was not an enemy that could be fought. Every battle fed it, every attack made it stronger, every defense became food for its growth. The coalition had started with one devourer in their space. Now they had 5, and more colonies were going silent every day. Young Sick composed a message to the human government. His hands felt heavy as he typed. The warning was ignored. The entities are multiplying. The coalition is losing. Request instructions. The response came back within hours, signed by the Human Defense Council. Maintain observation. Do not engage. Do not assist unless directly ordered. Activate the silence protocol for all human colonies. We will save who we can, but only on our terms. Young Sick looked at his screens, at the spreading darkness consuming the galactic colonies. He thought about Tymon's warning 6 months ago, about how the Assembly had laughed. They were not laughing anymore. Across human space, ancient systems activated. Fields of energy that had been dormant for decades hummed to life, wrapping human worlds in invisible shrouds. To any outside observer, to any devourer's senses, those worlds would seem dead, silent, already consumed. Humanity vanished from the galaxy's awareness, hiding behind technology they had spent 200 years perfecting. And in the darkness of space, the devourers continued their feast, growing and multiplying with every world they consumed. The galaxy had ignored the Elder's warning. Now it would pay the price. 3 months into the crisis, the galaxy was dying. Daewon stood in the command center deep beneath Earth's surface, watching holographic displays that showed the terrible spread. What had started as 5 devourers was now 50. What had been 50 was becoming 500. Each consumed world fed their growth. Each destroyed fleet added to their numbers. The mathematics of it were horrifyingly simple. Exponential growth with no natural limit. "How many survivors?" he asked quietly. Jin'ei, captain of Earth's defense fleet, pulled up the latest reports. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and grief. "Refugee ships are arriving every hour," she said. "We've processed 3 million so far, most from outer colonies that had enough warning to evacuate. The core worlds—" She paused. "The core worlds waited too long." Daewon had been a general once, back when humanity still engaged with galactic affairs. He had retired 50 years ago, thinking his war days were over. Now he had been called back to service, not to fight, but to coordinate the impossible task of saving what little remained of galactic civilization. On one screen, a coalition warship limped toward human space, its hull scarred and leaking atmosphere. Inside were 10,000 refugees crammed into spaces meant for 2,000. They were the lucky ones. "Jin'ei," Daewon said, "send medical ships to intercept. Get those people processed and into proper facilities." "Yes, sir." The communication system chimed. An incoming message from deep space, marked urgent. Su-Jin, the communications officer, looked up with wide eyes. "Sir, it's from the Coalition High Command. What's left of it?" "Put it through." The hologram shifted to show Krixtal. The proud avian leader looked nothing like he had 6 months ago. His feathers were dull and ragged. One wing hung at an odd angle. His eyes, which had held such arrogance, now showed only desperate fear. "Humans," he said, his voice broken. "We were wrong. We were fools. Please, I'm begging you, help us. Our worlds are falling. Our people are dying. We have children, families, civilians who did nothing wrong. Please." Daewon felt the weight of those words. Part of him wanted to say no, to remind Krixtal how humanity had been mocked and dismissed. But that was the part of him that was angry and hurt. The larger part remembered that he was human, and humans did not let people die when they could be saved. "We're already helping," Daewon said. "Every ship that reaches human space is given sanctuary. but we cannot fight the devourers for you. That battle cannot be won." "Then what can you do?" Krixtal asked desperately. "We can hide you. We can save who makes it to us. But you must understand, our way of survival requires sacrifices you may not want to make." In a side chamber, Hyunwoo was giving a presentation to a group of refugee leaders. He was a thin man with glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. He had spent his life studying the warnings left by extinct civilizations. Now that knowledge was desperately needed. "The entities you call devourers have appeared 3 times before in galactic history," Hyunwoo explained, gesturing at ancient texts displayed on screens around the room. "Each time, they consumed 95% or more of all advanced civilization in the galaxy." A Kresh diplomat, one of the few survivors of their species' leadership, spoke up. "How did anyone survive to leave warnings?" "Small populations," Hyunwoo said. "Hidden colonies. Groups that retreated from the expansion zones quickly enough. But most importantly, civilizations that learned to hide their presence completely." He brought up an image of a tomb world, covered in ancient carvings. "This species, we call them the Vorim, survived the devourers by masking their life signs. They made their worlds appear already dead. The devourers passed them by, seeking more obvious sources of matter and energy." "How did humanity learn this?" another refugee asked. Hyunwoo adjusted his glasses. 300 years ago, a human exploration mission found these tomb worlds. The commander was named Kwan Ho. He was my great-great-grandfather." He pulled up old footage, grainy and faded. It showed a younger man in an early model spacesuit standing before massive stone pillars covered in alien script. "Kwan Ho's team found 12 different extinct civilizations. All had left the same warning in their own languages. He spent 20 years decoding their messages, understanding what they had learned too late. The footage showed more tomb worlds, cities frozen in time, showing signs of hasty evacuation, libraries carved in stone, warnings repeated over and over. They described the devourers in detail," Hyunwoo continued. "Not as evil or alive in any way we understand, but as a natural process. They called them the cleaning cycle. Every 50,000 years, when the galaxy becomes too noisy with civilization, the devourers awaken. They consume, they clean the slate, then they sleep again." "That's insane," someone said. "It's nature," Hyunwoo replied. "Is a forest fire evil? Is a flood? The devourers are simply what happens when civilization spreads too far, too fast. They are entropy in action." He brought up the technical specifications. When Kwan Ho brought this information back to Earth, humanity had a choice. Ignore it like the previous 12 civilizations did, or learn from it. Yuna stepped forward then. She was the chief engineer of the Silence Field technology, a woman who had devoted 40 years to perfecting the systems that now protected humanity. "We chose to learn," she said. "We studied every scrap of information from the extinct species. We tested theories, we built prototypes, and over 200 years, we developed what we call the Silence Fields." She activated a demonstration. A small sphere appeared in the hologram, pulsing with life signs, heat, electromagnetic radiation, all the things that a living world produced. "This is a normal planet. To a devourer's senses, it looks like food." She activated the silence field. The sphere's signals changed, becoming flat, cold, empty. "This is the same planet behind our field. To a devourer, it looks already consumed. Dead, not worth investigating." "Can you protect our worlds?" the Kresh diplomat asked hopefully. Yuna's expression turned sad. "No, the silence field isn't something you can just install. It requires a complete restructuring of your civilization's energy output, your population distribution, your technology infrastructure. It took humanity 200 years to implement it across all our colonies. How long would it take to protect our worlds? The same, 200 years, minimum. The room fell silent. They did not have 200 years. They did not have 200 days. Day Wan entered the chamber then, his presence commanding immediate attention. "We tried to warn you," he said quietly. 300 years ago, when Quan Ho brought back his findings, we shared them with the Galactic Coalition of that era. We showed them the tomb worlds, the warnings, everything. He pulled up old records of that ancient meeting. They called us paranoid, backwards. They said we were trying to scare them into abandoning expansion so humans could claim more territory. They dismissed everything we showed them. The refugees looked at the old footage with growing horror, seeing their own leaders' ancestors making the same mistakes. "So we made a choice," Daewon continued. "We would save ourselves since no one would listen. We withdrew from galactic politics. We stopped expanding. We put every resource into building the silence fields and preparing for what we knew would eventually come." "You've been preparing for 300 years?" someone asked in disbelief. "Yes, because we knew this day would arrive. The warnings were clear. The devourers come every 50,000 years. We just did not know when the next cycle would start." Daewon looked at each refugee leader in turn. "It started when you pushed into the outer rim, when you woke them from their sleep." Krixtal's voice came through the communication system again. His broadcast was being heard across all refugee ships now. "We doomed ourselves," he said. "The humans tried to save us and we laughed at them. We called them cowards and fools, but they were wise and we were the fools." Jin-A brought up new tactical displays. The devourers now numbered in the thousands. They had consumed 60% of the Coalition's territory. Major core worlds were falling silent. "We're receiving distress calls from 100 systems," she reported. "They're begging for evacuation assistance." "Send every ship we can spare," Daewon ordered. "Prioritize civilian transports over military vessels. Get as many living beings to safety as possible." "The Council has authorized full refugee acceptance?" Jin-A asked. "Yes. We'll save everyone we can. But they need to understand. They're accepting our protection on our terms. They live by our rules, under our silence fields in our designated zones." Sujin looked up from her station. "Sir, we're detecting a new signal. It's a massive civilian evacuation fleet from the core worlds. 30,000 ships. Can they make it to human space?" "Not all of them. The devourers are moving to intercept." Daewon closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of impossible choices. "Jin-A, take the defense fleet. Screen those evacuation ships. Buy them time to reach the border." "But, sir, engagement with the devourers will—" "I know. Any ship we lose will feed them. But if we do nothing, 30,000 ships full of civilians will die. Make them count every second we give them." Jin-A saluted. "Yes, sir." The human defense fleet moved out, old ships with older technology, designed not for fighting, but for one purpose only, to distract and delay. They would not fire on the devourers. They would not try to destroy them. They would simply get in the way long enough for others to escape. Daewon watched the tactical display, knowing that some of those ships would not return. But the alternative was to let millions die without trying. And humans, he thought, did not abandon people in need, even when those people had abandoned them first. The refugee processing station orbited Earth's moon, a massive structure that had been built in secret over the past century. Now it hummed with activity as millions of displaced beings from across the galaxy passed through its corridors. Hana walked through one of the main processing halls, her tablet in hand, checking status reports. The young diplomat who had stood beside Tae-min at the Galactic Assembly now carried the weight of coordination on her shoulders. She had aged years in the past few months. Next group, please, she called out. A family of creche moved forward, 2 adults and 3 children. They looked exhausted, their belongings packed into a single case. The mother held the youngest child close, the infant's eyes wide and confused. Names? Hannah asked gently. The father provided them. Hannah entered the information into the system, marking them for housing assignment in Processing Zone 7. You'll be given quarters, food rations, and medical screening, she explained. Children will be enrolled in educational programs within a week. Adults will be assigned work duties based on your skills and abilities. Work? The father asked. We thought this was sanctuary. It is, Hannah replied. But resources are limited. Everyone contributes. Everyone works. That's how humanity survives. The family moved on. Behind them, hundreds more waited in line. Tai-min found Hannah during her break period. The old diplomat looked even more weathered now, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. Not happiness. The situation was too grim for that, but the acknowledgement that humanity had done what it set out to do. How many today? He asked. 50,000 processed, Hannah replied, rubbing her tired eyes. 3 million total since the crisis began. The stations are at capacity. We're setting up temporary habitats on Mars and the outer planets. Not enough, Tai-min said. Never enough. Hannah looked at him. The core worlds are falling faster now. We're receiving estimates of total casualties. I don't want to know the numbers. Billions, Tai-min. Billions who could have been saved if they'd just listened. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the endless stream of refugees. You were right to warn them, Hannah finally said. Even though they didn't listen, you were right to try. Was I? Tai-min asked. Sometimes I wonder if I should have been clearer, more forceful. Maybe if I'd shown them more evidence. They didn't want to see evidence. They wanted to keep expanding, keep growing. It's what young civilizations do. Hannah touched his arm gently. You did everything you could. Deep in Earth's archives, in a facility that few people knew existed, Hyunwoo was giving a private tour to selected refugee leaders. These were the ones who wanted to understand, who needed to know the full truth. The archive tunnels went deep into the planet's crust, protected by layers of rock and the silence field. Here, humanity stored everything they had learned about the Devourers and the previous extinction cycles. This is the Tomb World data, Hyunwoo said, gesturing to vast rows of servers. Every image, every recording, every translation we have from the 12 extinct civilizations. He led them to a chamber filled with physical artifacts, pieces of alien technology, fragments of stone carvings, preserved samples. These species had different names for them. The Vorium called them the Harvesters. The Kelthan called them the Silence That Eats. The Praxis called them the Return to Nothing. A refugee leader, a Tharn elder named Kes, examined a crystal that held ancient data. Why does it happen? What purpose do the Devourers serve? We've debated that for 300 years, Hyunwoo admitted. The best theory is that they're a natural regulation mechanism. Think of the galaxy as an ecosystem. When civilization spreads too far too fast, it creates imbalances. Energy signatures, quantum disturbances, waste products. The Devourers appear to clean up the noise. So we're just pollution to them? Kes asked bitterly. To them, there's no difference between a city and a mountain. Both are just matter to be processed and returned to a neutral state. Hyunwoo brought up old footage then. The kind of footage that humanity rarely shared with outsiders. This is from 300 years ago. My ancestor, Kwanho, leading the first expedition to the Tomb Worlds. The screen showed a young human man in an old exploration suit. He stood in an alien city, preserved in time. Buildings rose around him, beautiful and strange, completely intact, but utterly empty. This was the Vorim capital. Quan Ho's voice narrated from the recording. Population estimate, 200 million. They evacuated in an organized manner, taking everything they could carry, but they left their cities standing as warnings. The camera moved through empty streets, shops with goods still on shelves, homes with furniture waiting for owners who would never return. The Vorim survived, Quan Ho continued. Our probes found their descendants on hidden colony worlds. They live in small groups, no more than a few thousand per planet. They've maintained their civilization for 47,000 years by staying small, staying hidden, staying silent. They're still alive? Kes asked in shock. Yes, Hyunwoo confirmed. We made contact with them 200 years ago. They're the ones who taught us how to build the silence fields. They've been through this cycle before. They know how to survive. The footage continued. Quan Ho's expedition visited all 12 tomb worlds, documenting everything. On one world, they found a library carved into solid stone. Every wall covered in text, repeated in different languages, saying the same thing over and over. We were warned, but did not listen. We thought ourselves clever, strong, advanced. We were fools. If you read this, know that we doomed ourselves through pride. Learn from our mistake. Hide, survive, wait. When Quan Ho brought this back to Earth, Hyunwoo said, humanity had a decision to make. The Galactic Coalition at that time dismissed our findings. They said we were overreacting to ancient superstitions, so we stopped trying to convince them. He pulled up the minutes from that ancient human council meeting. The vote was unanimous. We would prepare ourselves. We would build the infrastructure to survive. We would create the silence fields. And we would withdraw from galactic affairs until the next cycle passed. 300 years of preparation, Kes said quietly. Yes, 30 generations of humans, all working toward a goal they knew they might never see completed. My great-great-grandfather started this work. My children might see it end. Yuna joined them then. Her engineering expertise needed to explain the technical details. The silence field isn't just one piece of technology, she said. It's a complete integration of hundreds of systems working together. Power generation that produces no detectable signatures. Manufacturing processes that create no waste. Population management that minimizes biological signals. She brought up schematics of Earth and the human colonies. Every city is built underground or inside asteroids. Every ship is coated with dampening fields. Every human wears a personal field generator at all times. We've restructured our entire civilization around one goal: invisibility. The cost must be enormous, Kes said. Not cost sacrifice, Yuna corrected. We gave up expansion. We gave up the freedom to build wherever we wanted. We accepted population limits. We chose small, hidden, sustainable over large, visible, and vulnerable. She gestured to the vast facility around them. This is why we can save you. Not because we're strong enough to fight the Devourers, but because we're patient enough to hide from them. Back in the command center, Daewon was receiving the latest reports. They were not good. The Coalition had lost 75% of its territory. Major core worlds that had stood for millions of years were now hollow shells. Species that numbered in the billions were reduced to thousands. But the evacuation continued. Human ships moved through the chaos, pulling survivors from doomed worlds, screening refugee fleets, buying time with their lives. Jinny's fleet had returned, having lost 30 ships but saving 15,000 civilian vessels. The human crews were hailed as heroes by the refugees. Daewon did not feel like celebrating. 30 ships, 30 crews, gone. He looked at the main display, showing the protected zone of human space. Behind the silence fields, humanity's worlds showed no signs of life to outside sensors. They appeared dead, consumed, not worth investigating. The Devourers were passing them by, seeking easier prey. How long until they finish? he asked Su Jin. At current consumption rates, 3 more months. They'll consume everything worth consuming in the accessible galaxy. Then they'll enter dormancy. 3 more months of this horror. Taemin entered the command center, moving slowly. He approached Daewon with a grim expression. The Council wants to know how many we can save. We're at 3 billion refugees, Daewon replied. Maximum capacity with our current infrastructure is 5 billion. We might stretch it to 6. The coalition population before the crisis was 3 trillion. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. We're saving everyone we can, Daewon said firmly. Every single soul that makes it to our borders gets sanctuary, but we can't save everyone. I know, Taemin said quietly. I just wish they had listened. All those lives would still be lost, Daewon finished. Even if they'd started building silence fields the day you warned them, they wouldn't have had time. The Devourers were already awake. Taemin sat down heavily. Then why did I bother warning them? Because it was right. Because maybe somewhere in all those refugees, someone learned something. Someone who will tell their children, who will tell their children. Maybe in 50,000 years, when the next cycle comes, galactic civilization will remember. On the screens, another world went silent. The harvest continued, and humanity watched, saving who they could, while the galaxy paid the price for ignoring the Elder's warning. 1 year had passed since Taemin stood before the Galactic Assembly with his warning. 1 year since the galaxy had laughed at the paranoid humans. Now there was no laughter. Taemin stood on an observation deck aboard the refugee processing station, looking down at Earth. The blue-green planet turned slowly below, beautiful and peaceful. Around it, thousands of ships orbited, refugee vessels, human transports, medical frigates, cargo haulers, the desperate remnants of galactic civilization. He had aged terribly in the past year. His hair was completely white now, his face deeply lined. He walked with a slight limp from the stress and exhaustion. Hana found him there, as she often did during quiet moments. Final count? He asked, without looking away from Earth. 3,200,000,000 souls, she replied. From 47 different species. We've settled them on Mars, Europa, Titan, and 17 asteroid habitats. Out of 3 trillion. Yes. They stood in silence, the weight of those numbers pressing down on them. Mi-sun's latest report came in, Hana continued. The Devourer activity is slowing. They're entering the dormancy phase. Another 3 weeks, and they'll all be sleeping. And the galaxy? 95% consumed. The numbers match what happened in the previous cycles. Taemin finally turned to look at her. How are the refugees adapting? Slowly. Most are still in shock. They lost everything. Their homes, their civilizations, their families. But they're alive. That counts for something. Down on Earth's surface, in a community center built for refugee integration, Bo-Ra was addressing a gathering. The stealth ship captain had become a liaison between humanity and the survivors, someone who had witnessed the horror and could speak about it honestly. I know the rules seem harsh, she told the assembled crowd. Limited living space, mandatory work assignments, restrictions on energy use, but these rules are what kept humanity alive. They're what will keep all of us alive. A young creche in the audience raised a hand. For how long? Do we hide forever? For 50,000 years, Bo-Ra replied bluntly. That's how long the Devourers sleep between cycles. By the time they wake again, everyone in this room will be ancient history. The reality of that timeline settled over the crowd like a heavy blanket. But, Bo-Ra continued, your descendants will be alive to see it. Your species will survive. Your cultures, your knowledge, your stories, they'll continue. That's more than 95% of the galaxy can say. In the human archives, Sung-Ho was working with refugee scholars to document everything that had been lost. The old philosopher had spent his life studying civilizations, and now he was witnessing the greatest loss in galactic history. "Tell me about your homeworld," he said gently to a Tharn elder. The elder, whose name was Kess, closed his eyes. Tharnia was old, 20 million years of continuous civilization. We had cities that touched the clouds, oceans filled with floating gardens, libraries that held the wisdom of 1 billion lifetimes. "Tell me everything," Sung Ho encouraged. "Every detail you remember. We'll record it all." "Why?" Kess asked. "It's all gone now." "Because memory is how we defeat death," Sung Ho replied. "The Devourers can consume your world, but they can't consume what we remember. Your civilization will live on in these records. Future generations will know what Tharnia was." Kess began to speak, and Sung Ho recorded every word. Around them, hundreds of other refugees were doing the same, pouring their memories into humanity's vast archives. Cultures that had stood for millions of years, reduced to oral histories and fragmented records. But at least they would not be completely forgotten. In the command center, Daewon was addressing the Human Leadership Council. The decision that needed to be made was enormous. "The refugees are requesting permission to begin rebuilding their civilizations," he reported. "They want to know their options for the future." "What are those options?" one council member asked. Mi-sun stepped forward with her analysis. "Based on our understanding of the Devourer cycle, we have 3 possible paths for the refugees." She brought up 3 different projections. Option 1, cryogenic sleep. "We put them in stasis for the next 50,000 years. When they wake, the Devourers will be dormant, and they can rebuild their civilizations in safety." "The technology exists?" another council member asked. "Yes. We've been developing it as a backup plan for humanity. We can accommodate the 3 billion refugees in cryo facilities on Titan and several outer moons." "Option 2, Daewon prompted. "Live under our protection in designated quiet zones. They accept permanent technological limitations, live within the silence fields, and maintain small, sustainable populations. Essentially, they become like humanity, hidden and patient." "And option 3? Mi-sun hesitated. "Leave. We provide them with generation ships and send them to other galaxies." "Give them a chance to escape this entire cycle," the council members murmured among themselves. "That's a long journey," someone noted. "Millions of years in transit." "Yes," Mi-sun agreed, "but some might prefer that to waiting here." Daewon turned to Tae-min. "You've spoken with many of the refugees. What do you think they'll choose?" Tae-min considered carefully. "Most will choose option 2. They want to live, not sleep. They want to see their children grow, build something with their own hands. They've learned what humanity learned 300 years ago, that survival matters more than expansion." "Some will want the cryo-sleep," Hana added. "The ones who can't accept what happened, who want to wake up in a galaxy where their civilizations might rise again." "And the generation ships?" a council member asked. "Very few," Tae-min predicted. "That's giving up on ever returning home. Most won't want that." Over the next month, the refugees made their choices. 70% chose option 2. They would live under the silence fields, accepting humanity's way of life. Small communities, sustainable populations, a quiet existence. 25% chose cryogenic sleep, hoping to wake in a better future. 5% chose the generation ships, deciding to leave the galaxy entirely and seek new homes among the distant stars. Jin-A oversaw the cryo facility construction on Titan. Massive chambers were carved into the moon's icy crust, where hundreds of millions would sleep for 50 millennia. "Will they dream?" a young refugee asked as she entered her cryopod. "We don't know," Jin-A replied honestly. "But when you wake, the galaxy will be yours again." The generation ships launched one by one, massive vessels carrying entire communities toward distant galaxies. They would travel for millions of years, their passengers living and dying aboard the ships, generation after generation, until they reached new homes. Bo-Ra watched them go with mixed feelings. "I hope they find what they're looking for." "They'll find something," Young Sik said. "Maybe better than what they lost. Maybe not. But they'll have a future." In the archive facility, Sung-Ho was working late. He had spent months recording refugee testimonies, documenting lost civilizations, preserving everything he could. Now he was preparing the final record, the warning that would be left for the next cycle. "What should we say?" Kess asked. The Tharn elder had become Sung-Ho's assistant in this work. "The truth," Sung-Ho replied. "Exactly what happened. No embellishment, no drama, just the facts." Together they composed the warning. It would be recorded in every known language, stored in indestructible crystals, and placed on tomb worlds throughout the galaxy. The warning read, "We are the survivors of the fifth cycle. The devourers came, as they always do. We were warned by those who came before us. We ignored the warnings, believing ourselves too advanced, too powerful, too clever to fall to the same fate as previous civilizations. We were wrong. If you are reading this, you are in danger. The devourers sleep for 50,000 years between cycles. They will wake again. When they do not fight them. Do not try to destroy them. Do not expand into the territories marked on these maps. Hide. Survive. Wait. Learn from our mistake. Listen to the elders." Taemin stood before the memorial wall in the main refugee center. Names were being carved into its surface, millions of them. Names of lost worlds, lost civilizations, lost people. He placed his hand against the cool stone and closed his eyes. "I tried," he whispered. "I tried to warn them." "You did," Hana said softly, appearing beside him. "And because you tried, 3 billion souls are alive. That's not nothing. It's not enough. It never is. But it's what we could do." On Earth, in a park in Seoul, human children played in the afternoon sun. They laughed and ran, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded above their heads. Their parents watched over them, grateful for the simple peace of a safe world. Among the playing children were refugee youngsters, Kresh, Tharn, Vorin, dozens of species all mixed together. They played the same games, laughed at the same jokes. The galaxy's future, learning to live together in the quiet. In deep space, Misun's sensors detected the last devourer entering dormancy. The massive entity folded in on itself, becoming smaller, denser, until it disappeared from normal space entirely. Going back to wherever they came from, back to sleep. "It's over," she reported to command. "The cycle is complete." "For now," Young Sik replied. "They'll be back in 50,000 years. Then we have 50,000 years to prepare." Daewon stood down from active command, returning to his retirement. Jin-A took over coordination of the refugee integration programs. Hana became the chief diplomat for human-refugee relations. The work continued, but the emergency phase was over. Taemin spent his final years teaching at the Refugee Academy, sharing the lessons humanity had learned. He died peacefully at age 72, surrounded by students from a dozen different species. At his funeral, Krixtal spoke. The old avian leader had survived when most of his species had not. "I mocked this man," Krixtal said, his voice heavy with shame and grief. "I laughed at his warning. I called him paranoid and foolish. I doomed my species through my arrogance. Taemin tried to save us all, and I refused to listen. Let that be my legacy. Let everyone remember the fool who ignored the elder's warning. And let them remember the human who tried to save us anyway." The memorial records were completed and sealed in the archives. Multiple copies were created, stored in different locations throughout human space. When the next cycle came, when new civilizations rose and made the same mistakes, the warnings would be there. Whether anyone would listen remained to be seen. 50 years after the crisis, Hana was an old woman. She stood in the same park where Tae Min had once stood, watching children play. Human children and refugee children, all growing up together under Earth's sun. "Did we do the right thing?" a young human aide asked her. "We did the only thing," Hana replied. "We survived. We saved who we could. We recorded the truth. That's all anyone can do." "Will the next civilizations listen to our warnings?" Hana smiled sadly. "Probably not. The cycle repeats because each generation thinks they're different, smarter, better than those who came before. They'll make the same mistakes, and somewhere, someone will try to warn them, just as the Vorim warned us, just as we warned the Coalition. Then what's the point?" "The point," Hana said gently, "is that some will listen. Not everyone. Maybe not even most, but some. And those who listen will survive. They'll pass on the knowledge, and slowly, over millions of years, maybe wisdom will finally win over pride." She looked up at the sky, where the stars were just beginning to appear in the evening light. "Humanity learned to be patient, to be humble, to survive instead of conquer. That's our gift to the galaxy. Not technology or weapons, but wisdom. The knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to hide, when to wait, when to simply endure." The children continued playing as darkness fell. Above them, invisible to all sensors, the silence fields maintained their vigilant watch. And in the deep places between galaxies, the devourers slept, waiting for the next cycle to begin. But humanity would be ready. They would always be ready. The elders kept their watch.